Jeff Richards. If you're not here for the central control room, you're going to have a good time anyway. My first hypnosis training was something that really excited me, and I thought this was going to be so cool. I will not bore you with the long, boring story about how I got into hypnosis, but it was difficult for me to find training around where I lived. I'm from Central Ohio. I wound up going to a school up in Detroit that worked on weekends. And I would go up there for 3 days, and I would come back and not have anybody to practice with except my invisible subject, who we may be meeting a little later today. So I would forget 75% of the stuff that I learned until I got back up to Detroit. And by the time I got done, I was a certified hypnotist. I had a certificate, I must have been certified. And I didn't know how to do crap. And I know I'm not alone in that feeling. I hope I am alone in this room here today. I know I'm not alone out there in the world. So it was a little frustrating getting started. I learned some new things. I finally got some good training. And one of the things I discovered is that if you have more logos on your website than the other guy in your town, you're going to get the calls for the thing that that person doesn't want to work with. One day I got a phone call from a woman who was having severe morning sickness, debilitating morning sickness. And she was wondering if hypnosis could help. Sure, hypnosis could help. Make sure I got a referral. You all know the drill. Make sure you get a referral when you're dealing with medical stuff. Got the referral. And I was so excited about helping this woman that it wasn't until she actually sat down in my client chair that I realized I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with this woman. Now, I mentioned that I had gotten some other training after that class in Detroit. One of the people I trained with was a man that probably many of you have heard of, a man named Mark Cunningham. And Mark taught me something really important. It was more important than any technique. It was more important than any language pattern. It was the simple fact that the greatest skill a hypnotist can have is the ability to make shit up. And as I'm talking to this woman, and I'm eliciting the qualities of her experience, because I'm not a woman, I have not had morning sickness, I am not married, I don't have kids, this is not something that has ever been a part of my life, I knew nothing about it, which in retrospect was probably a good thing. I didn't have any preconceptions that I had to get rid of. I realized that I might know something that could help her. There was a part of my smoking cessation program that I used called the central control room that I figured I could modify for just such a circumstance. And so when we got done, and just for curiosity's sake, because everybody does things a little bit differently, my office is set up with 2 pairs of chairs. I have a pair of chairs over by the desk. Got a regular desk chair for me. I have a side chair for the client. That's where we talk about stuff. Other side of the room, I have a nice chaise lounge with a footrest, and I have a gigantic recliner. It's like a person-and-a-half size recliner, lazy boy sauce. And that's where the hypnosis occurs as far as the client is concerned. A lot of hypnosis happens over here. We're going to talk about that. The chaise lounge with the footrest is the hypnosis chair, unless when I walk out to the lobby to meet my next client, I make the assessment that that client weighs over 350 pounds, which is the weight limit on the chaise lounge, in which case the person-and-a-half recliner becomes the hypnosis chair. I'm flexible like that, I hope you are too. And so we moved over to hypnosis chairs, plural. And I began to take her into the central control room, as I will describe in just a moment. Because the central control room is a cybernetic platform that you can use to address behavior, that you can use to address physiological response. And if you could conceivably remove a connection, change the way that this particular thing, whatever that thing might be, interacts with another part of that person's life, or if you can attenuate a response, or in some cases, increase a response. The central control room is a valid place to do it. It's something that just about everybody understands. A lot of times I've run into metaphors that are from people who've written these things quite a number of years ago. And sometimes you're dealing with metaphors that people just don't get. Who here does the element induction, or knows it, or has run across it, or has heard somebody do it? Okay, just about everybody. And so you've probably heard the traditional language talking about letting your muscles become loose, limp, and relaxed, just like a dish rag. Okay. I don't know about you, but I've got enough problem with my sponges smelling nasty. I don't have any rags around my sink. If you're dealing with younger people, they probably don't even have the concept of washing dishes by hand, especially if they're from a certain socioeconomic strata. Dish rag, completely off their radar. Washcloth. Just about everybody uses a washcloth, at least in this culture. Central control room is a wonderful thing because just about everybody understands that you can control stuff, especially in this day and age of electronic gizmos, doodads, and gewgaws. I have no idea what a gewgaw is. I'm absolutely amazed by the number of small to mid-sized black nylon cases that I have around my house because of all the electronic stuff I have that have controls. We've got a little voice recorder over there on the table. It has controls. There's a camera back there. It has controls. Pretty much every one of us has a phone in our pocket. It has controls. Beyond the fact that the central control room contains controls, I don't provide a lot of detail about what this place is like. I want to walk you through very, very quickly how you get to the central control room, how you get yourself set up into it. At the very beginning here, I do have, word for word, there in italics, at the very top of your handout, exactly how I lead someone into the central control room. I induce hypnosis in their favorite way to achieve hypnosis. My favorite way really doesn't matter unless they've never been hypnotized before. Just out of curiosity here, I've had this conversation once a couple of years ago. I was talking to somebody from San Francisco, and I don't remember who it was that long ago. And I mentioned that a good 99% of my clients have never been hypnotized before. Is that a common occurrence? Would you say that that's mostly right?
Yeah.
Most of your clients have never been hypnotized before?
Yeah.
I see a couple of people not nodding their heads, so maybe that's not true for you. I guess it's just a regional thing. The person I was talking to was from San Francisco, and her numbers were completely upside down. She couldn't think of a client she had who had not been hypnotized before. Which is even better because then she gets to use their favorite way to experience hypnosis. But once you have the person hypnotized, no matter how you hypnotize them, you ask them to experience standing in front of an elevator. I like to use the word experience rather than imagine. I was talking with Michael Watson about this yesterday afternoon, and my way of thinking is simply this. I want this to be as real and as vivid an experience for them as possible. Does it truly make that much of a difference whether you say imagine versus experience? Well, probably not. Maybe 1/10 of 1%. But if you have enough of those 1/10 of 1% adding up, eventually you're going to run into something that makes a significant change. You know, as someone once said, $1 million here, $1 million there, pretty soon you're talking about real money. So I asked them to experience themselves waiting for an elevator. I do a college check beforehand, make sure they're okay with elevators. Not everybody is. If they're not okay with elevators, quite often I'll just have them walk down a path. It's a nice sloping path. Again, making sure that walking is okay, they don't have any sort of allergies, they're not deathly afraid of bees or deer running out in front of them, and if they are, I make note of that, because that could be another session, you never know. Well, let's assume that they're okay with elevators. You have them waiting for the elevator, and they get a sense or an idea, because not everybody's good with making pictures in their head. I've had a significant number of clients who the only reason they're there is because they can't make pictures in their head, they just didn't know it. I worked with a young man several years ago. He had just recently been diagnosed as having attention deficit disorder. Prior to his diagnosis, he was a young man, generally happy with really crappy grades. And then he got diagnosed. Now he was a young man, generally miserable with really crappy grades. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that he just didn't learn the way the teachers were teaching him, because that's how they had to, because you've got the playbook and you got to go by the playbook. Once he understood that it was okay that he wasn't very good at making pictures in his head, and that it was perfectly okay for him to swap out feel every time they said here, he made a huge amount of change, and that was, one sentence. It's really great that we get to do what we do and help people make these really quick changes. They're not always the kind of thing that we imagine them being, in and out one session, but when you're working with kids, it usually is, and it's really fantastic to watch that. So you have them get a sense or an idea that they're standing in front of a pretty fancy elevator, the kind that's going to take important people to important places, and that's certainly true in this case because it's going to take them to someplace very important. You're building in the presupposition that they are very important. You don't even have to step on it. You just, important people, important places, them, someplace very important. And it is going to take them someplace very important. It's going to take them deep, deep inside their mind. Not quite, but almost to the very center of their mind. A place called the central control room. Why not to the very center of their mind? Because you might want to use that place for something else. And if we have time, I'll tell you what that place is. The elevator ride is a big, long deepener. Going down deeper and deeper down. That's right. Deepening your voice as you go down through the sentence. So that you can get both the analog and digital sense of going down, further and further down. Down to a place called the central control room. A place where all of the processes of the mind and the body are monitored and controlled every single day, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. You got to throw that in because otherwise you're going to be freaking out that they're not paying attention to whether or not they're breathing. So, that's bad. Just want to clear that up. That's bad. Again, you're always assuring this is a nice, safe elevator. It's the most perfect elevator in the world. It is their elevator, and therefore it's safe, because, of course, you would make a very safe elevator for yourself, would you not? Of course you would. The elevator comes to a full and complete stop before the doors open, revealing the central control room. Take all the time you need in the next few moments to get a sense or an idea of what this place is like. I don't tell them anything about what this place is like, because everybody's central control room is different, and it's fascinating to hear what these places are like. Sometimes people will volunteer, I never ask, but sometimes people will tell me what their central control room is like. And for a lot of people, it's just a big room with controls, kind of like, well, no one's ever used this particular comparison, but I've had people talk about rooms full of controls, and the thing that I remember is the movie The China Syndrome, which is certainly not something I'm going to put in my client's head. Those of you who are not old enough to remember that, that's okay. I had one woman, she runs a heavy equipment rental company. And her central control room was the cab of a front end loader. I never would have come up with that, but she did. The mind's an amazing thing. You give the mind a problem to solve, it will figure out a way to solve it. You give the mind a constructive problem to solve, it will find a way to solve it. You can prove this to yourself. How many people out here have ever said to yourself, you do something, the results you got weren't the results you wanted, and you said to yourself inside your mind, and I hope that no hands go up, but I'm sure some will, what did I do that for? You know where this one's going. Because if you ask yourself crappy questions, you'll get crappy answers. Ask yourself good questions, you get good answers. And if you ask yourself to create good representations inside your mind, I love that word, representation. Could be anything, could be a picture, could be a sense, an idea, a feeling, sound. It's a representation inside your mind of the central control room. And when you have a sense of where things are, go over to the controls for, and this is pretty much the only place where you have to get creative, go over to the controls for, if it's a habit they want to eliminate, you go to the controls for that habit. This came out of a smoking cessation program that I did. If the person's coming for smoking, go over to the controls for smoking. They're right where you think they'd be. You don't want them roaming around all over the place looking for the central control room, looking for the right controls, because they're right where they think they'd be. And I have them nod when they get there. If any time any person has a problem with this, well, just imagine that they were there. Can you do that right now? You can. That's great. Thank you. If it's something that they want to increase or decrease, then I have them go to the controls for, in the case of the woman with morning sickness, go to the controls for pregnancy. Because we don't want this to be all about the morning sickness. This is just a subset of part of the experience of pregnancy. I mentioned in the description that I've used this with day traders. Day traders are an interesting subset of the market. Not a lot of people are working with them. And most of these people need help with intuition, and they need help with believing in their ability to perceive a lot of information very quickly. In this case, you might want to go to the controls for perception. Go to the controls for intuition. Go to the controls for perception, and you will notice that right next to them are the controls for intuition. And if they're not there, go ahead and make them be there right now. This is your control room. You can do whatever the heck you want. Isn't that amazing? If you're doing this for a habit, I try to avoid using aversive techniques with habits. Just because in an absolute worst case scenario, not only do they still have the habit when they leave your office, but now they hate it even worse than they did when they showed up. You're not going to get a win every single time, but I think we should do whatever we can to avoid making it worse. I don't think that's unreasonable. If I'm working with somebody for a habit, during the pre-talk, I'll elicit from them the times and places where they are most inclined to exhibit that behavior. For smokers and people who use smokeless tobacco, again, a subset of the market that not a lot of people are correctly marketing to. I even have a PDF that I will email them. If you would like a copy of that, go there, go to my contact form, and let me know, and I will send you my smoking habits survey. And on there I have, mixed in with a bunch of other stuff, a lot of common smoking triggers. I smoked for 20 years myself. The smoking habits survey is, truly speaking, not a thing to let me know about their habit. It's a thing to let me know about how honest they are with themselves about their habit. Because unless there's somebody who really controls their smoking, maybe there's somebody who only smokes like 5 cigarettes a day, they've almost quit, they just need to get over that last hurdle. Unless they're one of them, if there's somebody who's smoking a pack a day, they're probably lighting up a cigarette as soon as they get on the phone. They're probably more inclined to smoke when they're around other smokers. Unless they've got a hard and fast rule about not smoking in the car, they're probably lighting up a cigarette as part of the car starting process. And the smoking habit survey is a way for me to know truly how in touch they are with this habit of theirs. And if I find that they're not checking a lot of the stuff that I would expect to be checked, we'll talk a little bit more about it. There might be a reason. That might be a true reflection of what's going on. It might be that I just need to work with them just a little bit longer until they get to the place where, yeah, they really want to quit. Once they're in the central control room, there are all these connections between all of these otherwise perfectly normal things and this old abnormal smoking habit they used to have. I was talking with one of my teachers many years ago, a man named Steve Worley. Steve is an NLP trainer up in, at this particular point in time, Vernon, British Columbia, Canada. And I asked Steve specifically, it's generally a good idea to talk about what your client wants rather than what your client doesn't want. And I always talk about achieving your ideal size and shape when I have someone in for weight loss. And when you have someone smoking, well, the opposite of smoking is not smoking. That's not going to work. And so he and I kicked around a few ideas, and we came up with normal, which works for everybody except hippies. Because, you know, man, I spent a lot of my life trying not to be normal. Could you come up with something else? Yeah, healthy works with hippies. Nothing wrong with being a hippie. It's just that normal doesn't work with most folks like that, and that's okay. That's something that they've strived their entire life not to be. Who am I to say that they can't be not normal? That's fine. So we just help you with that. Now, for those folks who are okay with deciding that not smoking is normal, I make sure to point out that the smoking habit is abnormal. And you have all these otherwise perfectly normal experiences that they in the past had connected to this old abnormal smoking habit. And so during this process, I have them at their own rate and speed very quickly. Sure, why not? That makes sense. Disconnect all of these connections between this otherwise perfectly normal set of experiences and this old abnormal smoking habit they don't even have anymore. And I'll run through the ones that they had listed. Add a few others that are vague enough that I'm not going to step on their reality if I happen to mention it. I don't like saying stuff that's completely in conflict with my client's reality. I hope that you're the same way. Because there's only a handful of things that will pop somebody out faster than if you're describing something that has nothing to do with the way that they experience what's going on. So I try to be as vague and general as possible at all times. With someone coming in for something that they want to attenuate or to increase, I have them just go over to the controls for, as we talk about pregnancy, find that subset of controls for those experiences that you used to have. You don't have them anymore. I always presuppose success. You used to have them. And just go ahead and dial those back to the level that you think is the level that you should be experiencing. And then knock them back another 5%. Right out of college, I was a recording engineer. And one of the things I discovered was that as you add certain qualities to recorded music, you tend to be more aware of them because you're the person who put them there. You add a little reverb to something. You know it's there. You can hear it. You put it there. Nobody else can hear it. So you need to add about another 5% to what you thought you needed so that it's actually noticeable. I turn that back if I'm the work I do with my clients. Put the setting where you think you need it, and then if you were bringing it down, bring it down another 5%. If you were putting it up, put it up another 5%. Is there something magical about 5%? No. If you like the number 7, use that. It doesn't really matter. So you have to make the changes that they need. If you're working with somebody with habits, I will also have them disassemble the control panel. And I'll mention to them that maybe you haven't noticed, or if you have noticed, or you can notice right now, that there are tools all over the central control room. Every kind of tool that you could possibly need. And as you are disconnecting all of these otherwise perfectly normal experiences from that old abnormal, whatever the heck it is, habit that you used to have, go ahead and disassemble the controls. After all, you don't need them anymore. You let go of that habit as soon as you walk through my office door. And it doesn't matter whether you're very precise and detailed as you take them apart, unscrewing every screw, unbolting every bolt, or whether you just grab a big old hammer and rip it up. It doesn't really matter. That's your choice. And as you get down into the guts of the thing, you're going to find the very first connection you ever had. The very first connection you ever had before you ever stuck that first dip between your cheek and gum, before you ever lit up that cigarette, before you ever smoked that bowl, whatever the heck it is. And I don't know what that first connection was, but you do. It's the oldest one, it's the deepest one, it's the one that probably has been the one that's been keeping you from being successful before today. Go ahead and find it, and whether you know what it is or not, go ahead and disconnect now. they're done doing what they need to do, and I always make sure that they tell me, taking all the time you need in the next few moments to get this done. Stole that one from Mark Cunningham too. Something he calls trance logic. It may not be true, but it's real. I love that. When you've made the changes that you need to have in order to get the results that you want, return to your elevator. It's sitting right there. It's your elevator. It's there waiting for you. And take the elevator back up. You can transition into emergence. You can transition into something else. It doesn't matter. You can make this ride up much, much longer than the ride down. You can do all sorts of stuff. Lots and lots of direct suggestion. There's nothing wrong with direct suggestion as long as that's not the only thing you're doing. You can make some stuff happen in the central control room if you want to. How are we on time? One of the things that I like to do, and this is especially true if someone's worked with another hypnotist or whether they've worked with me maybe several years back, I do occasionally get the call from somebody I've seen 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, you know, I was out with some buddies and they were all smoking and, well, I figured I'd just have one just to see what would happen. Okay. I try to be as helpful to my clients as possible. And if I can have some personal fun while I'm doing that, I'm going to do that. And so I might suggest to them, oh, you want to see what would happen? Because you were hypnotized, it wasn't going to catch on fire. Okay. Because, you know, cigarettes will do that after you've been hypnotized. They're completely inflammable. Because we are all that good. No, that's not what happens. So they'll come back, and because they've been through this process once before, the one and only thing that I will ever tell somebody is in the central control room is sometimes in the central control room there is a great big giant television up on the wall. You can do some stuff with that television. You can create a nice disassociated scene designed to create massive aversion within them. For smokers, I have them imagine that they see a dark, completely dark room with one single light shining straight down. You can't tell the size of the room because of how incredibly dark it is. It might be a huge room with one light. It might be a tiny room with one light. And under that light is a table. And you are sitting at that table. On that table is a pack of cigarettes. It's your brand of cigarettes. It's open. There's even some cigarettes poking out. It's just close enough so you can reach out and grab it, except someone has popped up a big giant lung cookie right onto that pack of cigarettes. And I won't do this right now because I don't want anybody upchucking in the nice Orleans Hotel and Casino. But I will suggest to them, again, letting them do most of the work, that it is just the most disgusting, slimy, technicolor mess they have ever seen. And in order to reach out and touch one of those cigarettes, they've got to touch it. In order to put one of those cigarettes in their mouth, they've got to put their lips and tongues on it. I let them do the work. I let them make that grossness happen for them. Yeah, I do keep a garbage can right next to the hypnosis chair. Never had to use it. Better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it. You can also use that big TV screen to future pace a person's result. Now, I will future pace outside the central control room to ensure that they get a sense that as they go through their life, as they experience the various places and times where they either need this positive resource that we've just increased, whether they want to ensure that they don't have the kind of physiological experience that they used to have, or to prove to themselves that they have severed those connections, I will have them future pace their lives, having at least a couple of all of these experiences. Again, in the case of habits, I will take them through everything on the checklist. Anything else that they told me about, I always ask, is there anything on this list that isn't here but should be for you? And I'll write that down and use that. Good times, bad times, all sorts of weather, all sorts of places, all sorts of people, all sorts of feelings. And each and every time and place, in case of people with habits, you are normal. No matter where you go, there you are. Yes, stole that from Buckaroo Banzai. And you are normal. With someone with morning sickness, you don't have to take that out all that far. Hopefully, their pregnancy is going to last at the most another. Like I said, I know nothing about morning sickness. I know nothing about gymnastics, but I see a lot of gymnasts do it. It doesn't seem to matter. When does one start experiencing morning sickness? Straight away? Okay. So at most, they've got another 9 months of this. Okay. Like I said, I don't know anything about this stuff. They do. That's wonderful. I don't know anything about day trading either. I don't know anything about being a police officer. I've seen tons of cops. Cops are great. We only experience cops from the taking orders side. What you don't understand is that cops have to receive orders. Cops are great at taking instructions. So are military people. If you get a chance to see Carl's presentation on working with emergency personnel and military people, and that's something that you want to do, I highly recommend that. I'm going to be there. As long as they know what they need and you listen to them, that's all that matters. In any event, you're not going to future face for the rest of their lives not having morning sickness. Perhaps through other pregnancies, yes. Day traders, until they achieve their goal. It doesn't really matter. At some point, you wrap this around, you emerge. During the emergence process, I do like to just put bullet points on all the stuff that we've already done. In a moment, not just now, but in a moment, I'm going to count from 5 to 1. When I reach the number 1, then and only then, your eyes are going to open, you're going to feel alert and aware, I'm feeling fantastic. And with each and every number that I count off, all of the thoughts, ideas, suggestions, understandings, and realizations that you have experienced here today are becoming fully and completely woven in with your own habits, actions, beliefs, and behaviors. So much so that by the time I reach the number 1, all of these things seem like old familiar habits, things that you've known and experienced for a really long time because of how normal and natural it all is for you to have all of the experiences the way that you want them that we just laid out for you in the entirety of the session. 5, mind, body, spirit, fully integrated. 4, becoming more and more aware of the room around you. 3, becoming more aware of yourself, sitting right there in that chair. 2, noticing that certain feeling in your fingers and your toes. What feeling? I don't know. It's their fingers, it's their toes. They know. Letting you know that this has been a powerful, productive hypnosis session. Yes, that is an embedded command. And only when you know that the thoughts, ideas, and suggestions, understandings, and realizations that you have experienced here today are fully and completely integrated into your habits and behaviors, only when you know that from this day forward, you have achieved the change that you came here for, will you open your eyes when I say the number 1? Eyes open, alert, and aware, feeling great. Feel great, don't you? This is yes. Yeah. Questions? Yes?
Have you ever had people come back for more than one session?
For the same thing because it didn't work the first time?
Yep.
Generally speaking, I don't do single sessions. I'll do at a minimum a 3-session package. The 3rd session is spaced out a little after the first 2, just to give time for anything that we didn't catch in the first 2 sessions to crop up, so we can nail that sucker down too. As I mentioned before, I do occasionally see people for these habits who sometime down the road wanted to see if it really worked, and, well, yeah, it really worked until you made the conscious decision to ignore all the stuff that we did. So, yeah, I'll sometimes get folks back like that. I have this one guy out in Dayton that calls me about every 36 months because every 36 months he's just got to see if the stove's hot yet. So, yeah, that does sometimes happen. Anybody else? Yes?
If it's a person who is experiencing morning sickness and you do the control room, would you have them destroy all the controls?
No. I would not do that. I suppose you could. I wouldn't. I mean, you know, you can do anything, but no. For habits, I have them destroy the controls. For anything that we're just dialing back, or anything that we're increasing, I have them have the controls where they are. I also have them lock that down. There is a mechanism in the controls, again, I don't see how it works, to lock that into position. Go ahead and do that now. But yeah, that's a really good question, thank you. Anything else?
This observation, it doesn't seem like a good idea to make a biological function, destroy the control for a biological function. It just seems like a bad idea.
You're absolutely right, that's why I don't do it. Anybody else? Okay. Well, thank you very much for being here today. Again, thank